Mr. Lukashenko, first of all, thank you for inviting me. Relations between Ukraine and Belarus are going through a difficult time, but the fact that you agreed to this conversation is already hopeful. And separately, for the viewers, I will tell you what you said the day before. No forbidden questions, no forbidden topics. And thank you for that. That's the general formula for dealing with those journalists that you invite. Otherwise, what's the point? You are a man of your word. This is a conversation you promised me 2 years ago during a big talk. I was reminded, I can't be sure now. Well, then unfortunately we were hampered by the war. I met it in Kiev, in the status of as the main opposition journalist, but first and foremost as a citizen of Ukraine, and like millions of Ukrainians, I know very well what the war is. On the 21st of February, the Russian military crossed the border into Ukraine from Belarus. And it would be dishonest and insincere if I didn't tell you that millions of Ukrainians are waiting for me to ask these very questions. Yes, you have said many times that Ukraine was the first to prepare an attack. And again, it would be dishonest if I didn't say that many, probably the vast majority, do not believe that Ukraine was the first to prepare an attack. What would you say to all these people, perhaps in a few sentences? You know, it's difficult for me to add to what I said, first of all. And secondly, yes, from the territory of Belarus, some units crossed the border of Ukraine. But answering this question, recently I so casuistically said, why Russian troops crossed the border in the Chernobyl region. Ask Zelensky. So you can't answer that in 2 sentences, but you will leave what you need. I just want to tell you what happened back then. We were doing drills at the time. We were conducting in January, in the winter and February, we were conducting regularly scheduled military exercises between Belarus and Russia on our territory. A year in Russia and a year in our country. It was a large-scale exercise, and we saw what the situation was like. Not even on the border between Belarus and Ukraine, not even on the border between Russia and Ukraine. We've seen what's been happening in the West with Poland, Lithuania and Latvia. Remember the migration crisis. The exercises were over. Russian troops began to withdraw their troops that had been on the exercise, loading equipment. These troops were actually from the far east of Russia, and they began to come out. And on the 23rd or 24th of February, some of the troops, not the entire group, began to cross the border between Ukraine and Russia. It was unexpected for you and for the whole world. Although many people were talking about it, the Americans warned, here comes the war will start, and few people believed it, started crossing the border. Why? Well, ask the president of Ukraine that question. I wish I could. He's not as open as you are. Well, he was open like that, so why he is closed now? Let him answer the Ukrainians' question as to why Russian Federation troops crossed the state border. You can't make any claims against me. Not a single Belarusian from our army was there. We didn't cross that border. And here, you were provoking us. I told you about the 4 units of yours, mostly armed with point-U missiles that had been deployed along the border well before the 24th of February, and we were tracking them, our intelligence. Yes, they came, took the tarpaulin of the installations, then turned these missiles into a combat position and turned against us. And we had to deal with them during this Russian operation. The Russians destroyed them in the first place. Why do they accuse us of contributing to the outbreak of war here? No. There was already a war, and you unleashed it, Ukrainians. A war against Belarus, an economic war, first of all. And you declare a blockage against us in the southern direction. You didn't let our planes in before the Europeans did. You didn't let our cargoes through here. And then you arrested thousands of wagons and cars with mineral fertilizers that we were loading here in Odessa port. Then you seized 73 or 74 people on heavy trucks and killed several people, and I had to conduct a special operation to free them and then released all of them. But I have announced that if you don't return the men, I will conduct a special military limited operation on your territory to take the boys back. We took them away. You didn't even notice that we took them away. Only when we showed them in Minsk, you saw that. We behaved very carefully. We didn't commit any acts against you, neither economic, political, nor diplomatic. We behaved very honorably. Why did Putin start withdrawing troops to the Far East via Kiev? Ask Zelensky this question. He will answer you faster, but to accuse me of Putin going to Vladivostok via Kiev, you can ask Putin. If you will contribute, it would be my great pleasure. Mr. Lukashenko, in your opinion, could this war between Ukraine and Russia have been avoided? This war should and could be avoided. At what point? At any moment. And now it can be stopped, and then it could have been avoided. But there, I have in my memory, well, you know, that I was at the epicenter of all this, and sometimes I say that I was running between Poroshenko and Putin like a little dog. Putin says something, I go to Poroshenko. Poroshenko says something, I go to Putin. So I was aware of all the issues. Remember the moment when it was agreed that the Ukrainian constitution would be amended to include some kind of special status. Even so, on the peculiarities of self-government in certain region of the Donetsk and Lugansk oblasts regions. Quite right. And then it came to the point where there were going to be local government elections. That's what sticks in my memory. I tell you frankly what you don't know. No one has heard. But we discussed these issues with Poroshenko and Putin. Well, not the three of us, but separately. But I remember the conversation with Putin. I told him, look, it's a good option. Why not? In order to gradually, over the course of a year, 2 or 3 years, the territory would not be there, disputed and so on. As it was, what is the option? Well, bring this election. And Poroshenko says to me, you know, I will hold elections and they will be held under Russian control. I said to him, well, this year they will supposedly be held under Russian control. We can agree about that. Okay, I said, I will hold elections there as you agree with Putin and Poroshenko. Both of them turned it down? No, Poroshenko said no. Putin was all for it. Why do I remember that? Then I thought, look, they will hold elections this year, the second year, the third year. You already know what elections are in Ukraine. And the Ukrainian currency would quietly be there. You would be in control of this territory. 400 kilometers of border will be Ukraine. Donbass would have been sort of go back to Ukraine. He was afraid that the wrong people would be elected. The conversation was like this. Well, the wrong people were elected this year. But you are closing the border here. It is all inside Ukraine. Next year they will elect the right people. That was the conversation, and then it was necessary to solve this issue. Moreover, the Minsk agreements are here. They agreed on everything. The Minsk agreements should have been respected, but they were not. And I understand that no one was going to respect them. Was Russia going to do it? 100%. 100%. But you can't blame Russia for not intending to. You have no facts for that. And the fact that Ukraine did not fulfill the Minsk agreements is a lot of facts. Mr. Lukashenko, you said in one interview that you often argue with Putin. In the last year, have you had any disputes with Putin and that concern Ukraine? You know, we have different points of view. Let's say there's a lot of talk about peace right now. What should we do? We express different points of view about it. That is, there is a topic, and we discuss it. And it is not the way some people in the West try to present it, the so-called oppositionists, that Lukashenko is lying under Putin. But those who know me realize that this is impossible. With my character and my approach, there were times when Putin and I had such sparks around our conversation that I wonder how it came about and what it cost you that you did not recognize Crimea for 8 years and there was no air traffic with Crimea, although I can only assume that Putin insisted on it. No, he never insisted, and I did not recognize Crimea, Abkhazia and so on, as I was reproached, not because I had a special point of view there and so on, as much as I thought it was beneficial. It wasn't. No, because it didn't change anything. It didn't do anything. We have cooperated with Crimea, and we are cooperating. They came to us, asked us for certain assistance back those in the days, buses, cars, something else. Please buy. We sold to them, and Ukraine later reproached us that our buses were there. Look, in our world, anything can be sold, and we did not hide it. Neither Abkhazia nor Crimea, because I heroically stood my ground for 8 years. No, I was simply not necessary. It was simply not necessary for a practical point of view. Do you remember the occasion when Putin and I were going to visit Crimea? It was my initiative. I told him, listen, come on, I haven't been to Crimea for a long time. Our resort, I love Ukraine immensely because my roots are there. My great-grandfather, I love and loved Ukraine very much. This is my personal thing. And I remember my eldest son was still young, but I traveled there and always treated Ukraine with love, and I still do, no matter how much they make out of me to be some kind of bastard. People will sort things out in time. Well, we'll talk about it separately for sure. Yes, and talking to Putin on this subject, the last conversation we had was again about this situation. The situation, and somehow in our hearts we sat together for many hours. When was that? That was time we met him in St. Petersburg, then Valam, and there he sits and says, you know, it's bad that we collided, two nations, and you were involved. Well, Slavs, he says, here I give you information, but nobody thought to subjugate, enslave, deprive Ukraine of its independence. Well, we didn't need it, but they should have behaved appropriately and kept us out of trouble. And I had nothing to say to him. On the contrary, I supported him. Look, I said, look, Russia is such an asshole, but why did they impose economic sanctions against us? Why did they close the sky? Why, I said, was it necessary to do this when the Americans and Europeans had not yet done it? Why run ahead of the locomotive? That's the usual sort of talk. Well, nobody was going to take away independence. Why did they act like that? And I've seen how they behaved since Kuchma. I'm quite unique to you, 100%. For 30 years, I have seen everything that has happened had something to do with these events. Everything started, unfortunately, with Kuchma. We will talk about it for sure. You have a unique experience because I know very well that you have had human contact with many of these people. Not so long ago, it was his birthday. You congratulated him. Of course, I always wish him a happy birthday. And not only him, and with Yushchenko, and with Poroshenko, and with Zelensky. Our first meetings, everyone was going around, oh, what good relations you have. Why did we have to quarrel? People who have worked with Putin say that he's a man who calculates several steps ahead. In Ukraine, they are now actively promoting the thesis that most people are there think that everything that is happening between Ukraine and Russia is Putin's imperial ambitions of Putin, and he has gone mad. No, Diana, I can say Putin has not gone mad. That's 100%. I haven't seen any imperial tendencies there, but I think that the leaders of big states always have their chests puffed out. I can really think as a human being. This also applies to the United States of America. There's no way to measure what they want and what they do. Russia is a huge empire, what can I say? Of course it puts its imprint on a person's character, but that Putin had some imperial tendencies, I don't have a single fact to confirm it, especially now. Well, look, Diana, we're not young people, not him nor me. We're outgoing people. You'll soon have to carry this weight on your shoulders, fragile or not. Prigozhin was just here. You are the future. We are already people who are leaving. What else do we need if we're talking about our personal matters? So it's all talk fiction and innuendo that Putin is spewing, especially now. How does he deal with it in a human way? He probably shares it with you, doesn't he? Well, he shares, but we weren't close friends anyway. He had one state, I had another. Something inaccessible to me and him remains somewhere in his pocket and so on. So other people's souls are dark, as they say here and there. I cannot say in detail, but what he's going through in connection with these events is not an easy situation. As a person who is absolutely adequate, experienced, who really analyzes and tries to look ahead, calculates, he has had such a life. He's a military man. He's had a life and a job where you had to calculate a lot of things ahead of time, and he really does, but he never, I'm sure, never calculated that it was necessary to enslave someone. Then Ukraine, then Belarus, then someone else. Nonsense. He's a very cautious man. He's not going to do anything out of the blue. And he'll make a step, and then he'll worry for a long time whether it was worth making a second step. So the fact that he'll make 10 steps by passing 9, by attacking Ukraine, is nonsense. He went step by step, and these steps were visible. And then here was the first conversation I had with Zelensky in the first days of the war on the phone, when my youngest son actually put me in touch with him. He said, "Daddy, talk to Vladimir." Well, you had such a relationship. We talked to him for a long time. He was dusting off something on the phone. I told him, we won't talk long, but remember, the war is in your country, not today. Tomorrow you will be asked, why is there a war in your land? Why you didn't prevent this war, no matter how difficult? So you have to clarify all that there, and the war could have been prevented, because I was between you and Russia the whole time, and I saw this opportunity. The most vivid illustration is the meeting here of the Normandy Four, or what it was called. It was all agreed, we agreed, that we would act in this direction. Why didn't we? That's a very good question. I'm sure we'll find an answer to it in the course of our conversation. When did Putin first tell you that he was planning to start the special military operation? Well, you saw him on TV, so did I. That's a first. We never had a conversation or any talk on the eve of military action that there would be a war. I swear to you that there was no talk that Russia would take any action against Ukraine. The only thing is that in a few days or 24 hours, I don't remember, he and I met at his country residence and discussed the situation that had developed. He told me verbatim, for the first time I'm telling you about it too. He said, listen, Alexander, you know the situation, if God forbid something happens, but we are allies. Of course, allies, everyone knows our treaties against Russia. Someone at war, we go to war against Belarus. They go to war, we have a unified army actually created here. If something happens, I said, what could happen? Anything could happen. Cover me, please, he said. And in the first days of the special military operation, if you remember, I made a statement that we are not getting involved in this conflict. There's not much we can do to help Russia. It can deal with anyone, but we will not allow Russians to be shot in the back. Remember, it had to do with Putin asking for his back. He was most likely afraid of a stab in the back from the west. You mean he asked for it? Yes. Cover for me, please. That's what he said verbatim. I jokingly said, cover you where? Well, the western direction in the junction of the borders of Ukraine and Belarus and Poland, where Western armory is being supplied there in Poland, Rzeszów, and to Ukraine. That's the only thing in days. Well, I didn't ask him any questions. How? What is it? It's a closed topic. Yes, friends are friends, but we are different countries. And what Russia is planning in the general staff, military issues, why should I talk about it? And I was further away from these questions, but this request was made, and I frankly said that we closed that part of the border, and in just 24 hours we managed to transfer special operations forces to the western border of Belarus, and there at the junction of these borders of Ukraine, Poland and Belarus. Absolutely honestly, I sincerely am telling you this. On the 1st of February, in an interview with Solovyev a few weeks before the war, you said that in the event of a Russian war on Ukraine, everything would last 3-4 days. Was there really a plan to take Kiev in these 3 days? Well, it was just a figurative way of saying 3-4 days. That takes not much time for Russia to take Kiev. And you know that for a month or two, Gostomel and the outskirts of Kiev, and it was really a matter of a few days. If the Russians had occupied Kiev, can you imagine what kind of war it would have been? The war would have been over by now. There is a very important point here. Everyone in Ukraine is convinced that Zelensky defended Kiev and that the Ukrainian army repelled the invasion. And that is why the Russians withdrew. Look, this is a fairy tale and nothing more. It was all created by the media and by Zelensky himself to show what was it really like. That's when there won't be no cameras. I'll give you one very interesting example that completely destroys this thesis. I am again caught between Putin and some forces in Kiev who had agreed, like the Germans, Hände hoch, we are no longer fighting in order to survive. And I had a conversation with Putin about it. I say, well, war is war. And to end the war, of course, you have to take the capital. of the country. Putin says to me, you know, it can be done immediately, instantaneously, but a huge number of people will die. What's the point? They say the first thing they told me, they are standing in the streets with direct fire MLRS guns, anti-aircraft guns, not only tanks, hiding behind kindergartens and hospitals. And how to fight a military war with them. So we are carrying out a point-to-point operation on the outskirts of Kiev. We cannot strike indiscriminately as they did. I mean, he was worried about having to fight so that there would be nothing left in the place of a school, because they were hiding behind the school, behind the hospitals, and really that's what happened. And now it's where Bakhmut we've been talking to Wagner. They hid behind the building of children's schools and kindergartens where people are. Same tactics, especially children. And so I had a conversation with Putin. He said, well, how will you hit them in Kiev if they are hidden behind schools and kindergartens there? I'm always verbatim transmitting the conversation. That is, it was not a war like one when they surrounded Leningrad and people starved to death there. Another man would have said, look, there's a war going on. And he said the truth. And Putin said the truth. And we haven't even started this war yet. And then, I won't talk about the reasons. You probably know that the Russian troops that were on the outskirts of Kiev left there, gone, and no, Zelensky repulsed nothing there. In fact, he had no troops there. He had no troops there that could have defended Kiev, and those that were there were halfway there. And they didn't want to die. They saw that everything was coming. The Russian armada was coming. They crossed the border. They lost a lot of equipment and manpower. A lot of people died. But they mobilized and approached Kiev, and the days for Kiev were numbered. And Putin then withdrew those troops. How he defeated the Russian army there? No. So everyone ascribes to himself this feat, which was not there. Putin pulled those troops away from Kiev. You have just said a very sensational thing, because I know the mood in Ukraine very well. This is what Zelensky's main propaganda is based on. First, that he is not Yanukovych and he did not run away. And second, that he repelled the Russian attack. Zelensky was sitting in the cellar at that time. He was not repelling anything. And the military saw how it would end. There were no troops there to defend Kiev from the north. And as they say in Russia, the Lord Father Frost helped to protect Moscow in 1941. So the weather conditions, you know, spring thaw, they blew up the dam of the river. I don't remember the name of the river, but it's not the Dnieper. Because more than a kilometer long the river became. In this respect, it was a natural obstacle, but there was only for a few days, and beyond Kiev, it would have been finished. Let him tell the Jews and Catholics, most likely, who guaranteed that if Putin didn't take Kiev, everything would be fine. I won't say anything more about it. Let Putin and Zelensky tell you. That is why no one had defended Kiev there. Yes, the Ukrainian guys who fought direct fire, he hid behind a kindergarten. There are many photos from space where they were hiding, and if he's such a hero and protected everyone, why at the same time in Kiev he handed out weapons to unknown people? Have you forgotten how cars were arriving, opening crates, opening ammunition, handed out weapons? Yes, I saw it with my own eyes. Why, if you've already defended? And who did you give those weapons to? And somehow now you're going to collect those weapons. Another important message you can often hear is that Russia expected the Russians would be greeted with flowers. There's that figurative expression again. Yes, it was most likely an underestimation of the situation. It is journalists like to say, especially in Ukraine, that Putin thought that he would be greeted with flowers. It is someone met him with flowers, but the mistake of the military was probably that they expected that Ukraine would not fight and there would not be these losses and such a war in Russia. In Russia, it's the most likely that such a scale was not calculated. Another fact also, very often in Ukraine you can hear that people from Ukraine are to blame for all these Ukrainian politicians close to Putin who whispered that let's come and meet with flowers, and it wasn't. Do you think it's true? Diana, someone whispered not to go in, someone pushed to go in, and so on, but to make a decision based on this whispering is simply ridiculous for a country like Russia. Although these issues were quickly resolved in the general staff of the Russian army, everything was compared. There's somewhere whispered that, or one thing, someone else, but someone to whisper one thing and it was accepted. Only those who don't know how it works and how decisions are made can reason like that. Do you think the war would have started if Poroshenko had been president instead of Zelensky? Well, you know, I often criticize Zelensky for his inexperience, his expressive nature, his character. You know what he's always been doing. It played a role. But the troubles, I didn't say it was for nothing. But it started from Kuchma, when there was not a definite course of this and that. And this will do this and that will do that. I remember talking to Yeltsin about the referendum on the constitution, meeting at his sports club there. And three of us drank 100 grams of vodka. We were standing near the bar. Kuchma started to say something about Ukraine, and Yeltsin said to me, "Oh, listen, help him make a normal constitution and hold a referendum." I'm saying, if I'm serious, I'm ready to plug in. And we developed together with your specialists, with Kuchma at that time, a draft constitution. It was more, let's say, more democratic that we had in Russia at that time, but something similar. There was no such strife as now in Ukraine we have, or then. The constitution was prepared and sociological polls indicated, and we didn't hide it, I was involved in it. So the polls indicated that Ukrainians would have voted for it, but time passed, not a damn thing was done. In fact, the constitution was ready, in fact adopted by the people. And at the next meeting I said to Yeltsin, "Well, Boris, nobody wants to do anything about this constitution." And I told him, well, he said, "Why?" I told him the Ukrainian parliament will not approve the constitution, and what parliament would go against the people, because it was not put to the parliament. This should be a referendum. You would have held a referendum and put the results in parliament. That was the option. That's where it all started. Kuchma, then Yushchenko, then Yanukovych, you had, and it all piled up. And Zelensky, an inexperienced person who is absolutely alien to politics, took it all on himself. He even openly promised in your film, Servant of the People, you saw these problems, oligarchs, thieves, crooks, and the situation around Ukraine, the most beautiful and richest country. You've seen it all. You put it on your shoulders. You carry it. That's a bit of a mouthful. So it's not only Zelensky who should be blamed. Yes, it's his fault that he failed in this situation. And who had it easier? Was it easier for Putin when he became president? Or was it easier for Belarusians when we had nothing, no money, nothing? We got screwed. We drew bunnies on the notes. Do you remember? Yes, I do remember. Does Russia have a responsibility in this? Yeah, of course. Russia is responsible for everything. And for the collapse of the Soviet Union, when there was infighting there on a personal level, among other things. Now they say, well, the Soviet Union would have collapsed anyway, and it's good thing it broke up like that, because there wasn't much blood. How much blood have we got spilled now? The wars are all over the perimeter now. There is no telling where this will end up. So Russia was the perimeter state that glued, held, responded. The successors of the Soviet Union, of course Russia is to blame. We are all to blame. Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, and so on and so forth. Poroshenko had a chance to turn things around, Zelensky included. You're a new man. You have nothing to do with what happened, but sit down, think what is best for your state, for your people. Why are you waging this war now? I drew you this map on purpose. Now Russia will crush your manpower and equipment. Already those ideologically motivated Nazis, as they were called, those ideologically strong people, they're gone. They're all dead. Who's fighting here already now? The ones you catch on the streets and bring here? They're untrained. Well, a bit of military, they can't handle this war machine. Russia has rebuilt. Russia is using the latest weapons on the front line today. Already drone grabbing, already a very different army. And the most dangerous, they are again, do not know whether to tell you or not, or please tell, they have 250,000 volunteer corps. Russia has 250,000 already trained and in reserve and trained. Do you have any idea what 250,000 is? The Russians have less on the front now. They are sitting in defense. It's not because they can't offend. They don't have to. And you go as drunken stone. You go on overweight, like in a film about Germans. You go to these barricades, but you don't reach even, this we'll see, you don't even reach to the minefields. You are just being wiped out by the thousands. You had 45,000 dead and crippled during the counter-offensive. 45,000. Your losses, 45,000. 1 in 8 losses, frontline losses. 1 in 8 losses. And 250,000 Russian reserves armed with state-of-the-art equipment. They will grind you here. And they will do what you are most afraid of. And your leadership is afraid of. They will cut you off to Moldova and Transnistria. Where are you going to do that? And over here, this is where the Poles are rubbing their hands together to push the Americans. They'll cut the West off from you, and you'll still have this scrap, this strip. If you do, then what will happen to you? And there will be no state like Ukraine. I will state with you. Is it a foregone conclusion that this is what you're describing? If you don't stop now, it's gonna be. If you don't sit down at the negotiating table now, Russia offers it. You don't want it. Well, you don't want it? Okay. Russia's power is enough, and no West will help you in this respect. We need to take your heads in your hand and act based on the realities, but to act in the interests of this big and beautiful territory. Mr. Lukashenko, one more time, just for the record, you said it's the 250,000 who could go to Odessa in particular. Why only Odessa? First of all, they are pressing you very seriously on the Kharkov directions. They are advancing most successfully. They are already counteracting you. They reported to me yesterday. We can see what's going on here. We see the whole front, not through the eyes of the Russians. We see it. And the main struggle of the war is taking place near Bakhmut. There's heavy fighting going on there. The front is almost stabilized, but here near Kharkov, they're pushing you back. And if they strike Kiev from Kharkov direction, what will you do? There are no such obstacles here. That's why they're here, neutralizing your capital. But the most dangerous thing is when they hit from Zaporozhye and Kherson. And what time frame we're talking about here, when this might happen? I don't know. It'll depend on how capable you are of fighting here. You don't have much left here. 45,000, but these are rough estimates. How much equipment was burned? The West is already beginning to realize that nothing will happen. Even with the help of the West, Ukraine will not be able to hold out. That's what you said about negotiations. You said if negotiations do not start in European, which of the parties can now go to them? Can Ukraine and Russia negotiate? Why would Zelensky? Why would the West? Why would Russia? Don't say that already today, the West. Americans don't need it. And the further the war goes, the better. It's expensive. War is expensive, and they want to weaken Russia by doing so. Not just weaken her, but bring her to her knees. They want that. We're Ukrainians, Zelensky, do we want it? Because the best people are dying there. Ukraine is losing practically everything. Ukraine doesn't need it. Ukraine, no, but for Zelensky? Yes, you emphasized the point correctly. Ukraine is not Zelensky, and Zelensky is not Ukraine. Zelensky, well, he is a hero. He's traveling around the world in a t-shirt with a trident on it and demonstrating his heroism. They know how to praise in the West. Remember how they greeted Gorbachev, Gorby, 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 and then Soviet Union collapsed. The same thing is happening to him. Oh, Zelensky, oh, he's a hero, etc. But what novel are you the hero of? Whose novel are you? You are the hero of their novel, but not the Ukrainian people. And if the people are drugged by their propaganda, as they say, nothing wrong with propaganda, but the Ukrainian people are drugged. There is no other point of view there. As I have been informed, you are a witness to that. Why are not in Ukraine? Why can't you work in a journalist in Ukraine? Because I have personal sanctions on me, a criminal record. I'm a wanted person. Right, because if you show up in Ukraine, at best, you will be locked up in democratic Ukraine. Best case scenario, there is a person, there is a problem. No person, no problem. So in the worst case scenario, you will simply disappear. This is what Ukraine has been turned into. People there today are drugged, but this won't last. I too observe public opinion in Ukraine, and not from the position of your sociological polls, but from the opinion of the people. So many people are starting to really give Zelensky a good credit and estimate. That is why he's hesitating whether to call elections or to use martial law to postpone them. This is very ambiguous. It is far from certain that Zelensky will win this election. Even though you are giving him a 19% rating, that's nonsense. I'll tell you, if elections are held soon, someone from the military, Budanov there or someone else, will become president. Someone in the military, but not him. That's why more and more people are realizing that Zelensky should, to put it mildly, find a way out of this situation so that the guys there don't die. Does a mother care what it's going to be like to keep her child alive? No matter what the method, you have to save not only your life, but your child's life. What patriotism are we talking about here? What kind of patriotism can you talk about when the life of your child is at stake? So the people are beginning to sober up in Ukraine and are increasingly demanding that those who fled, millions of people, we want to go home. Why is there a war? Your oligarchs I know for a fact, are fed up with all that. They want to keep their billions to make money there. The war doesn't let them. Investment? What investments if there is war? But the hawks in the West, United States of America, need to keep this war going. Why? Slavic peoples are fighting each other. Let them kill each other. It's good for them. So by weakening Russia, we will get closer to China from this side. That's their reasoning. Zelensky is playing this game, but it will end with the fact that the state of Ukraine, blooming, beautiful, rich in natural resources, will cease to exist. You said during a media interview in July this year that the negotiations could start closer to autumn. At the same time, Biden has already asked Congress to allocate $22 billion in aid for Ukraine. I have watched many of your interviews and noticed how many of your predictions have come true. Do you really believe that these negotiations are possible? Or can I put it another way? Will Zelensky be allowed to go to these negotiations? I honestly have little hope that he is making decisions on his own today. You know, based on my contacts lately during this year, they were different. I have to tell you why I say that the West is not the West. They are still dancing to the tune of the Americans. But Western Europe, I mean, Western Europe, Germans, French, others, except for the British, of course, they are firmly under America. They do not need this war. Their big men say that war is not in America, but the war is in our house. The war must end. The Europeans are absolutely determined to do so. But while following commands, the Leopards send... and they are reluctant to give up military equipment, by the way. That's why the West is no longer our unified collective cement. As it used to be. They are taking the signals to your president. Zelensky balked because the big boss... Why did he balk? Because the big boss from behind is the United States of America. That is, Europe is already slowly starting to drift. Public opinion in Europe, in the leading countries, is very bad about this war. Already more and more people are speaking out against it, that they feel the harm of this war on their wallets, among other things. Americans don't, they profit from it, and they support Zelensky in that regard. So there is no unity between the Europeans and Zelensky in terms of continuing the war. And if Americans want to ping Vladimir, as the young people say today, then Zelensky will go to these negotiations. There will be no arms deliveries through Rzeszow and other Ukrainian border crossings. So there will be no war. And why Americans would want to ping Zelensky? Because they will realize that Ukraine will not win, it will lose. And if it loses, definitely here and here, the Russians advance. Well, then the whole West loses. So they need to send out a signal at the right moment. And these negotiations are on what terms? A freeze on the front line? No, Diana, negotiations must begin without preconditions. This is a classic in any diplomacy. I think we should sit down at the negotiation table and discuss everything. Crimea, Kherson, Zaporozhye, Donetsk and Lugansk. Everything there has to be discussed at the negotiation table. We sit down, work out an agenda like we always do. The list of questions. We can go back to the issues that were developed at that time. And Russia was willing to discuss all issues. and Crimea, and as it was, oh, thank you, Lukashenko, for saying that Crimea was also discussed. Everything was discussed. Of course, Russia will never in its life go to return Crimea. It's not going to happen. I still doubt that we can agree on anything here in the East, but Russia is ready to talk and discuss any topic. Any topic, I'm telling you. But you, pushed by the Americans, don't want that yet. You don't realize that nothing is more valuable than human life. And you have 1,500 people dying in action every day. Putin told you under what circumstances he would consider that a special military operation has been fulfilled for Russia to date. You know, we didn't discuss it like that with him, but I dare you to take a stand. The objectives of the special military operation have been fulfilled to date. Ukraine will never be as aggressive towards Russia after this war as it was before the war. Ukraine will be different. First of all, the people in power will be more cautious, intelligent, cunning if you want, intelligent people who will understand that neighbors are from God and it is necessary to build relations with them. I am sure that the future Ukraine will not be dancing to the American tune. This is my understanding. I'm absolutely convinced that Putin thinks so too. I think he understands this process this way. This is a big lesson, not only for Ukraine. This is what is happening, but also for Russia, among others. And it is a big lesson for the whole world. And we are learning lessons from it, including Russia. And in Russia in particular, you can hear another point of view saying that things have gotten worse in Donbass. More people are dying. I can attest to that. I've been there more than once. Ukraine's getting more and more weapons. Soon they will get fighter jets. More and more hatred of Ukrainians toward Russians. And was all this needed then? Today we are wiser for the lessons learned so far from these events. Yes, everything you said is true. We have drawn lessons. And as you said, yes, it's true. We have angered the nations. Moreover, it seems to us irreconcilable position of Ukrainians and Russians. And you remember what the fascists did on the territory of the same Banderites, Khatin, and so on. But the wounds have healed. The Soviet Union had good relations with Germany. The collapse of the Soviet Union and Ukraine and Belarus, which was practically spoiled, wiped off the face of the earth, built up relations with Germany. Why can't we build our relationship? We will, but it's a journey. If we talk about it, but don't move towards it, it is unlikely that we will do anything about it. And the first step is to sit down at the negotiating table. Well, we'll look at each other like animals for the first day, and then we'll start talking. It was the same in Gomel, in Belobezhka Pushcha, in Istanbul. That's how it started. The fire was blazing, and then they began to discuss specific issues. But the Americans told Zelensky, stop. Let's go to war. We just need to find a justification for continuing the war. Well, we found it. The territory is Ukrainian. Liberate the territory. You've taken over the territory. Leave, and we'll negotiate. Is that possible? Is that possible today? No. So we have to look for other approaches. And the classical approach is to sit down at the negotiating table, including the powerful, and not like in Saudi Arabia. What kind of negotiations and talks were there if Russia was not there? What are you trying to negotiate behind the back of the main protagonist? So those who are involved, those who feel they should be there at the table, they should be. Secretary of the National Security and Defense Councils of Ukraine, Danilov, wrote on his Facebook that he did not rule out your participation in the talks, and that the negotiations were already being prepared. Is this a veiled invitation for you to participate in this talk? You don't know about this? Diana, that's not my question. I heard this statement, but you have to ask Danilov. We are co-aggressors, as you say, and in the West, naturally, our interests are there, and our positions should be heard. So I do not rule out that Belarus is obliged and should be involved in the negotiation process at some level. You will get only positive things from it, in that Belarus will be represented there. Are the negotiations going on? Of course they are. We have met with the representatives of your authorities probably 5 times. When was the last time? A few months ago, on behalf of the main intelligence department, there were these talks on the topic of Belarus' involvement in the prospect. Will Belarus fight or not on the side of Russia from the north? And many other questions. Lately, you've been concerned about nuclear weapons and Wagner. I mean, your questions have been piling up, but we've had these contacts. We've been talking. We're fine with that now. There is a proposal to continue the dialogue. Let's meet in Istanbul or the Emirates. Are you guys crazy, I say? We have 2,500 kilometers border with you. Let's go anywhere. And once we met in Lviv, yes, we will come. You crossed your mined border, which you have mindlessly mined, and there are maps even there. There are no maps even there. How many people will die later, after the war? And please come to Brest, Gomel, Mosa, anywhere, to Minsk, and we will organize a conversation with you. What are you suggesting? If we go to Turkey or Emirates? Yes, they're good countries, I don't mind, but we can negotiate here. Next, Zelensky noticed some kind of threat of those who organize these negotiations. Well, the so-called political competition. Well, it banned something along the lines special bodies of special services, including the military. With the Russians are conducting these negotiations in Ukraine and communicating Russia's position to Ukraine. They have contacts with us. There is a basis for these negotiations. There is a basis for these negotiations, and let's talk. But your politicians will play the game until the Ukrainian military overthrows this political elite led by Zelensky. Ukrainian will overthrow this political elite. You will see this, because the military see the futility of what is happening there. Are there circumstances under which Belarus can fully enter this war? To the war, if you, Ukrainians, do not cross our border, we will never participate in this war, in the heart of this war, but we will always help Russia. It's our ally. You know that combat alignment, training and ammunition, weapons and so on. You have 55 countries in the world helping you, but only Belarus is helping Russia openly like this. In Ukraine, you often hear that Putin is bent on getting Belarus involved in the war. That's stupid. You know why? Why? Because it won't do anything. 70,000 extra troops won't do anything. Nothing. At the very least, if something happened, they could bring their troops here. They have enough manpower and equipment. So involving Belarus additionally will not do anything. You tell me what it will do if we start a war against Ukraine. Nothing. On the 23rd of July this year, you said that the transfer of Ukrainian lands to Poland was unacceptable. I quote, "There is a lot of talk now about Ukraine joining NATO piecemeal in order to tear off Western Ukraine. Will Western Ukraine go to Poland? I don't think so. I don't think the Ukrainians themselves will allow it." Well, that's where Zelensky is going. You have made a decision that Polish or police officers or some other civil servants are almost equal to the Ukrainian ones. Are being prepared for. It's being prepared for. That's what I hear. Moreover, there are already units set up here in Poland, military units to help Ukraine. If they come here, you wouldn't be able to expel them back because the Americans are behind Poland. So there will be the Polish territory. Why not admit them to NATO? It will also be the Polish territory. They will bring it up, and part of Poland is already NATO, so everything is being prepared for it. And you, journalists, were the first to say so. The fact that we politicians have only just seen the beginning, you have said so. So this is unacceptable for us, as it is for Russians. So, Dina, in order to fragment Ukraine into pieces and not to stick it somewhere, it is necessary to stop here and to make sure that this integrity of Ukraine is preserved. This is what we need to, first of all, and then start to talk about it. This is what Ukrainians need this in the first place. The Ukrainians need that. We need peace. Everybody needs peace. You said that there were strikes on Ukrainian positions from Belarus before the war started, before the 23rd of February, because there was a threat of Belarusian cities. Are there any circumstances under which the Baltic states of Poland could be struck from the territory of Belarus today, if there is a threat to Belarus? So there can only be one threat: aggression against our country. Even if the aggression comes from Ukraine, God forbid, of course, Ukraine is not Poland, or from the Baltic republics, and the aggression against our country begins, we will respond with everything we have. And the blowback, and we have something, yes, we do. And this blowback would be unacceptable, as we are not competing with them. Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, NATO is behind them. Of course, we realize that the forces are incommensurable, but we will deal with the unacceptable blow, and they will get it, and they will receive unacceptable damage. That's what our security concept is based on. On the 30th of June 2023, you said, "Nuclear weapons will not be used while they are in Belarus, but we must have them." Quote, "Nuclear weapons will not really be used, which we have in Belarus. Otherwise, why were they brought here? If only an act of aggression is committed against us, an attack on Belarus, we will not hesitate. We will not wait. We will use the full arsenal of our weapons to deter the enemy." Why? Belarus is not Russia to watch and wait for something. From Brest to Vladivostok is far away. And in our country, this piece of land can be seized in a month and nothing will be left. So we will not delay and watch. As soon as aggression against us begins, we are, according to the plans, of course, I approve them publicly. I didn't say exactly what their plans were, but we will respond instantly with everything we have. And we did not import nuclear weapons to scare anyone. Yes, nuclear weapons are a strong deterrent, but tactical nuclear weapons are not strategic ones. So we will use them instantly as soon as there is aggression against us. Otherwise, we're not madmen. We don't want to do it, and we won't do it. And you don't rule out the use of nuclear weapons under these conditions against Ukraine? Against Ukraine, if it commits aggression against us, and not just nuclear weapons. We have something besides nuclear weapons, and we will not warn you that red lines have been crossed, and we will strike at the center of decision-making. It will be done without warning. So you don't touch us, and we don't touch you. This concerns Ukraine least of all. It concerns primarily those madmen in the West who are already preparing there. In an interview with Skabeva, you said, what, are you following me? Of course. I prepared very thoroughly for the interview. You said, the war we will win, but further on we'll be in a lot of trouble from the West. Did you mean that a big war between Russia and Belarus on one side and the NATO on the other side is inevitable? No, I think one of the lessons of Ukraine is that it can be avoided and should be avoided. Ukraine shows it is a terrible thing, and NATO's war with Russia and Belarus is a world war with the use of nuclear weapons. It won't just happen like in Ukraine, so it has to be avoided. The West, I know this for a fact, really doesn't want a nuclear war because no one will survive. Russia is the first country to stockpile nuclear warheads. That's about the size of the United States. Everyone will be involved. It will be hot, so nobody wants to die. Everyone wants to live, at least the way we live, and hope for the best. Then that's why even now I don't justify that this war is even possible. In Ukraine, the thesis that after the events with Wagner and Prigozhin is being actively promoted and the power is very weak in Russia, that was all a staging, they said, with Prigozhin, a performance to identify traitors and a pretext for Wagner's deployment to Belarus for further march to Kiev. Which of these is true? Well, let's go in order. Putin is not the same Putin, is absolutely not the same Putin. This is Putin squared, I would say. The recent period has taught everyone, including Putin, a lot. This is not the same man. This is a wiser, more cunning man, just so you know. And if anyone thinks that Prigozhin's rebellion has weakened Putin, nonsense. Total nonsense. That's one thing. Yeah, there are pros and cons, I agree, but the fact that Putin is weakened is nonsense. Putin is more mobilized, more cunning, and wiser. Our opponents should know that. You are saying it was staged? Look, but only madmen can say that it was staged at such a high cost. This thesis appeared immediately, but except for Ukraine, it is not dispersed anywhere. There was no staging here. As for your thesis of bringing Wagner in here and pushing it on me, there's no reason to post Wagner here and then go after Kiev. No pressure. That's not true, Dina. It was my suggestion. It was not Putin who wanted them here, or the Russians who wanted them here. It was my suggestion that in order to extinguish this rebellion and fire, any measures should have been taken. Because if there was a rebellion and a fire, it would have been it would have been very hot for everyone. Maybe the Westerners and Americans were happy that a mutiny, and then they woke up. They were more worried about nuclear weapons than anything else. Who will have it in their hands? Wagner, Prigozhin? Well, but it wouldn't have been much to anybody. That's why even our worst enemies didn't want this development of this rebellion. And to bring it to us, it was at the moment of negotiations with Prigozhin that I made my offer, when he told me that yes, I agree with you, we are ready to accept your terms. I told him to stop, not to kill. If Russian blood is spilled, here's the first drop. That's it. No one will talk to you. He called me back 4 hours later after consulting with his commanders and said, yes, we agree. But first of all, criminal proceedings have been initiated there. I said, well, it's a solvable issue. We'll discuss it with President Putin. The second question is about security guarantees. I told him that if there is such a decision, I will withdraw you on the territory of Belarus. I didn't even discuss this with Putin when I suggested it to him. So, no, Russia brought Wagner here. And they had the base here, and they deployed from there under the Lugansk region. They did not come to Belarus at once, and then they came to Belarus and started to settle down. You know, we have raised the topic of myth many times today, and we will raise the question about our people, about how poorly people in Ukraine know about the possibility of rebellion in Russia. And in Ukraine, there is a very widespread myth that the war will end when Putin is overthrown in Russia. Well, by and large, this is the only thing that Ukrainian propaganda offers people today. They say that there will be some kind of coup in Russia, and so we will. Do you agree with the statement that after that, what happened with Wagner and Prigozhin, there will be some kind of a rebellion in Russia? Or is it quite the opposite? The lesson from Prigozhin and his march for justice, the lesson is that there will be no more of these rebellions for the foreseeable future. Russia would have handled this so-called insurgency as well. It would have cost a lot of blood, but I think they would have, up to the point that units from certain parts of front would be taken off the front, but they'd manage. But this march itself says it's neither possible nor necessary. Well, frankly, already the next rebels will draw conclusions from this rebellion and will be afraid to do so. As for the overthrowing of Putin, which is the dream of Zelensky and his supporters, to overthrow Putin, well, let them try. Let them try. If these problems are not enough, you will get even more problems. No one will overthrow Putin today. Mr. Lukashenko, are you a good judge of character? I guess I have some experience working with people. In an interview 3 years ago, you said Zelensky was good. Diana, don't interpret it all in your own way. They said verbatim that Zelensky is not a bad guy. After your trip to Zhytomyr, there was a very warm meeting. You mean after your trip to Zhytomyr? Okay. It was a very warm meeting. We drank 100 grams in a restaurant, talked a lot about various topics, including women. A normal, sane man jokes, a normal, sane person. Absolutely, that's why I could say that. Well, normal, but but it's politics. Did I say he was good? But, well, maybe I overrated him a bit, but I really liked him as a person. You could talk to him humanly. I'm not talking about politics. Because we were sitting at the negotiations and they asked me questions. I answered them. I had nothing to learn from them. They openly showed that they were not involved in politics. They were interested in everything. But as people, and Zelensky as a person, he's a normal guy. I can't even get rid of that thought now. You know, I have very good information that Zelensky took the deterioration of relations between the two of you very hard. I know that from my sources, despite the fact despite the fact that Ukraine was, as you said, faster than the EU to impose sanctions on Belarus. Did you have any words for him now? I only have one word to him right now. I would say to him, Volodya, there is a war going on in your country, on your land. We have to do everything we can not to make it worse. Yes, what's done is done. We have to take responsibility for it. Based on the current situation, we have to stop. Especially for Ukraine, we have to stop this negative development for Ukraine. And it will be negative for Ukraine in the first place. That's the only thing I want to say to him today. I want him to hear it and start from here. I know for a fact he'll hear, I know for a fact he'll look up this message of mine. He and his guys are not stupid in this respect. They are good, they analyze, they read everything and draw the appropriate conclusions. They are not stupid people, but they are stupid in that they draw the wrong conclusions. Every time I come to Minsk, if you compare, I see well-maintained streets, perfect roads. There is a beautiful phrase, what we have, we don't keep. When we lose it, we cry. Here is in Minsk, sometimes you walk around it and the impression is as if Kiev, which it could be and which it once was. Well, Kiev is a beautiful city. You have communicated not only with all the presidents, you know, people who made the decisions, who may be even more responsible for what happened in Ukraine, oligarchs, businessmen, diplomats. If you can explain complicated things in simple language, what and when did it go wrong for us? When you started to plunder Ukraine, it all started. If you want to preserve the integrity of the country, if you want to preserve the processes, there must be this unity, there must be a core. This is, first of all, a state pivot. Like in our country, they're always criticizing the vertical power structure and dictatorship. But they were the ones who helped consolidate the entire nation and this pillar, you mean discipline. And we still managed to reach out to people. To tell them. And I say today, if you don't want to fight like Ukraine, let's work in the field. And people hear it, and I visit them. They quote it, ordinary people hear it. A combine harvester comes out with a company and starts telling us, and you have it gradually formed. It began when you started to give tasty pieces to oligarchs, and thus you created a mass of centers behind which were law enforcers, people with machine guns and assault rifles. I know you have there your Kolomoisky, Cheruta, Firtash, and others, the names I recall. They became militants who were already difficult for the state to resist. And remember, Zelensky arrived somewhere in some military unit where he was making excuses. I'm not a sucker. And they were just talking to him. When I heard that, it was creepy. This is not acceptable at all. Commander-in-chief, well, civilian, well, anywhere. And it has come to this in Ukraine, but he's a military man. That is, Ukraine was de-centered. The whole country was divided. You started to play democracy, to elect and re-elect everyone, and you blurred the responsibility by this. But it all started with the privatization, by plunderization, I would say, thoughtless, when in 24 hours, one man, either a convict or an ex-convict, became a billionaire. That's what it all started. You partitioned Ukraine and offended people. Ukrainians were terribly dissatisfied with that situation, and all that piled up. But it all started there. The economy was the basis for everything. You destroyed the richest and most beautiful country with this. And politicians, your billionaire oligarchs, came into politics. They started to raise certain people to the top. And then they started to give away pieces like to Poroshenko. take the pieces of some property to give away. They started to give something for politicians, and they started to create something. And when politicians have a lot of money in their pockets, they really squeeze and dovetail it. Take Poroshenko, and probably the current president, they say, has all the best in the West. That is why you have been slowly leaving the statehood and dividing Ukraine in your personal interests. Since 1994, now you're talking about people who have accounts in the West. In all these years, have you never had any thoughts of what it would be like to live on a yacht somewhere in Monaco? Has never been like this. That's not what I am. I'm not this kind of person. I'm not really into yacht. Heat, sunshine, it's not mine. If I go somewhere in the mountains, well, Sochi is the best thing I can say in winter. It's the best thing. I've been to Austria and other places. I've been to Switzerland, but there is no better place than Sochi. We have a recreational facility there. We have a hotel there. I have a house there on this property. What I can say, I don't need anything else. I'm not the type of person who, you know, here is money, money. I hate money because I grew up in a poor family. And I've always been short of money. And I hate money since then. Although I realize, I mean, how can you not have money? Money is needed. They say the more the better. The poverty, this poverty always pressed, always this money is not enough. That's why I hate it. I'm a different person, different in character. I can find my happiness at home, on the territory of Belarus, with anyone. So, I don't want to go on a yacht. I don't want to. If I'm in Sochi, where Putin has a schooner, I say, well, let me go fishing on a bare hook to catch some mackerel, even without bait. I can go a kilometer from the shore, and I don't want anything else. When I flew to Minsk, Kiev was attacked by missiles, and at Moscow there were drones sent. Today? No, not today. We flew in earlier. So there were drones to Moscow, and I thought whether people realize what valuable thing they have today, the resource of peace, probably, and God forbid Belarusians will never understand it. But also, not everybody understands it. But I also thought, again, I'm absolutely sincere, I have something to compare with. I've been in so many countries as a journalist, and I understand what is the atmosphere of order, and you can feel it. I've been able to talk to people a little bit, and I so had questions. Maybe you have an answer. What will happen to all without Lukashenko? Well, a lot of it depends on Lukashenko. Much depends on how much I can help or allow the people to determine their future, and presidential elections, parliamentary elections, and so on. And I mean, a lot of, if not all, depends on me. It happens to depend on me. 38 years at the same time. On that band, I only had 7 men in my staff back then. 7 people came, turned the country upside down, in fact. I became president. I was with the opposition, but then the people made their choice. It's been weighing on me for 30 years. The people believed in me. I have to die, but I have to do it, whatever it takes. I'm not burdened with billions of dollars, yachts, Nice, Cannes, and so on, and places like that. I was only dependent on people, doing things in the name of those people, and if the people, contrary to what it would, if what I would like to determine like this, but to determine sincerely, I have the power. I have to make sure it's genuine, that nobody falsifies anything. The people have made up their minds, well, God be with you. Then you'll be responsible for it. I will persuade, I will tell, and our people see that we may lose this island where it is quiet and it is possible to live. Diana, you can make money here. You can have a good job here. I see the way people dress. I see the cars. I see the restaurants you have. In Minsk, we have 3 or 4 cars per family. There are a lot of families with 3 or 4 cars. And that there is a car in the family, well, I have no doubt that there are families that don't have them yet. I won't say that we are rich like in Ukraine. No, we have poor people too. But if you want, you can earn money for your family and yourself. Then a good job will be offered to you. You will be dragged into that job. You don't have to look for anything. It's very simple if you want to. But if you don't want to, even if you don't want to, we push you to what you want. In what other state people will be pushed, not forced? We force some people to work, but it is not very many people. And this you can lose, but that's if the people decide to. And I have to provide everything necessary for the people to make their own decisions, to get this information. They have this information from a mechanic to a member of the government. You said that the next election will be difficult. Does this mean that you have decided for yourself that you will not run? I haven't made any decisions, honestly. Maybe it's some kind of a spiteful attitude, but I have so many problems I have to deal with. The time will come to make decisions. I will make decisions, but now it is necessary to endure. It is necessary to endure. It is necessary not to get into some kind of a history. I have to lead my people across this very thin, fragile ice, so they don't fall through. That's the most important thing for me right now, and my future, the future of my government, depends on it. That's why I'm doing this. Honestly, I didn't think, and even in my family circle, with my children, even with my baby boy, I call him that, have not discussed the subject. Although he's basically a grown man, no, I'm not up to it now. You've said many times that Nikolai, your son, doesn't want politics in any way, and now we know he's studying in China. Has anything changed? He's studying at Belarus State University, but they have formed a group with Beijing friends, with the university that Xi Jinping graduated from, and because he has known Xi Jinping's family since he was a little boy, his wife is a beautiful lady and smart, and it was his first time there. He met her, and with her family. He studied at the Belarus State University, but it's a joint group with a Beijing University. It's taught exclusively in English, microbiology, and he studies here and there. A person will receive a diploma from both the Belarusian State University and the Beijing University, but he will also be doing his internship at Sirius company in Sochi, in this Russian enclave, this center. It was Vladimir Putin who suggested it to him. He said, you stay, take a look. Putin was the tour guide and showed the opportunities for him. That is why my son will get this knowledge at the Belarusian University. He's actually studying at the Beijing University, as you said, and he will do his internship at the Russian laboratory, which is the leading laboratory in biotechnology. Yes, thank you. But he doesn't want. But he doesn't want to, at least not before. You said he doesn't want to do this, not categorically. Here, if you ask him a question, right off the bat, none of my sons see themselves as president. They don't even want to hear about it. They've had enough of your presidentship, they say. You said in one of your interviews that Putin won't be president until 2036. I'm quoting you. He will find a man who will continue the path Russia's development. Do you think there is such a person now? I think there is. And I think that if Putin doesn't see him now, he will see him soon. What, he doesn't see him now? I think so. Why not? He doesn't see him, right? No, I don't think he sees him. Why not? Because he's not thinking about it. He has problems, as I say. I have problems like him, but he has other problems. Of course, the country is big, but there are many other problems he has to resolve. Therefore, I think that the next president in Russia will be Putin. We have in half a year we have elections, and I don't see any rivals for Putin in Russia right now. I have an interesting experiment on my YouTube channel. We asked people on the streets of 4 cities, Minsk, Moscow, Kiev, and Chisinau. What is the percent of the utilities, of their income they pay for the utilities? So in Moscow it was plus minus 10-15, while in Kiev and Chisinau it was 50-60% or even 80% of their income. And pensioners said that they could have not survived at all without the help of children to pay for utilities. And I've been working in the Ukrainian media for 15 years. In Ukraine, the overwhelming majority still believe that the country is moving in the right direction. Those Zelensky videos, vidosiki as we call it, sorry, I'm using the slang, they are working. So for people in Ukraine today, the spectacle is more important than bread. Is that possible in Belarus? No, it's not possible in Belarus right now. If it were possible, it would take a decade for people consciousness to turn people's mind in this direction. That's the first thing. Secondly, everything you said, I don't believe it. Come on. Who says that? That people are sure that everything's all right? What did people say? No, it's a sociological study. And I know how you do sociological research. I do. And I know how sociological research is done in general. That's why I don't believe it, that people who are impoverished, dumbfounded by what happened before the war, and under the conditions of the war, believe that Ukraine is moving in the right direction. In what direction? So developed that they went to war. Now they're at war. Thousands of people are dying. What? They thought it was the right direction again? A mother who sends her child to war, or worse, they grab her child on the street and take him to war? She thinks that Ukraine is in the right direction? God, what a crazy country and people who think that way. I don't believe that. Ukrainians are smart people. And I advise you not to believe it, because we both have Ukrainian roots. Well, absolutely trusting your experience, Mr. President. A lot of talking to people, in particular, a lot of my group talks to people on the street. And I'm going to try to make my point now. Look, your group gets this kind of information from people. You know, the situation is that people are afraid. And secondly, there is a lot of hatred there. And when people have the opportunity to blame all their troubles, all their misfortunes on somebody else, and in this case it is Russia, because today Ukrainians blame Russians for all their troubles, you know. You said that the war could have been avoided. My entire professional career over the last 9 years, I have been saying that Ukraine should honor the Minsk agreements and take an absolutely clear position to a neutral status to prevent war, for which I am subject to personal sanctions and criminal proceedings in Ukraine. Moreover, again, I met the war in Ukraine and was there for a long time. There were threats to my mom and my grandmother, and we will take you out in bags threats. I know that hatred is. I know what hatred is. And long before the 24th of February, they made Ukraine a country of hate. And it was done deliberately. It was a state policy. How can we make sure that this doesn't happen to Belarusians? It is especially important now when it comes to young people. You know very well what social networks are. You know very well that if you type Lukashenko into Google or YouTube, what content is offered first, liberal or some other content, and you know how information technologies work. What to do about it? Difficult, Diana, but it must be confronted on the battlefield. If it is to score the appeared content, as you said, as much as possible, it should be a different content. Yeah, I know we're not rich people. It's a lot of money, right? But it's a question we've had to face. And to this challenge, we responded adequately. We went into the battle on the same field. Yeah, there might be one letter and that which is ours, but everything else will be fake. I'm watching and listening to some of this stuff, and every day of the week I've got a whole package on my desk with analysis on my desk every day. Everything about Belarusians, about Lukashenko. And Fidel Castro once told me in his lifetime, rest his soul in peace, for us the internet is a big opportunity. We have never been able to reach Americans, but by posting something on the internet, at least Diana will read us somewhere in America or Ukraine. I mean, this is an opportunity for us. So as much as possible, we have the strength to resist it on this battlefield. And you know, I won't say we're winners, but we're not losing yet. We are not losing yet, probably because the truth always wins. And if you don't tell the truth, then you don't win. Where do you get your information from? Telegram feeds, TV mostly, from where exactly? From everywhere. And I don't have my own phone or iPhone. I don't surf the internet, but I've got everything from this baby that lives in my family to everyone else. They're all feeding me Telegram channels, YouTube. You've got Panchenko's Telegram channel and YouTube channel. Yeah, Telegram channel, Panchenko, and YouTube channel. Now I'll have Panchenko every day. And here she said this and she said that. I'm not saying that I was absolutely immersed in this YouTube channel of yours, but now there is a new page, new people, and if Panchenko wrote about me or Belarus, they immediately print it out and bring it to my desk. I mean, I'm present everywhere, but at the same time, I never hold a phone in my hands. I can't help but ask. It's very common to hear, again, that Putin doesn't use the internet. Do you know anything about that? No, Putin doesn't use the internet as it is commonly understood. I very often come to see him, and he has a stack like this in his office. A big country, intelligence, counterintelligence, so on. A bunch of these materials, including Peskov. So Peskov is responsible for information from the media. There is a folder like this lying around. He flips through it and reads it. Then there is intelligence. I've seen these documents. He's telling me to take it and read it. So he won't even have time to sit there and poke around and look up for things. But he handles computers. I've seen it myself. He's computer savvy. Not like you, of course, and not like someone who works every day with computers. Well, he's a lot better at it than I am. I'm not. I hardly ever do that. As I said, I watched so many interviews with you, and I'm really convinced that you said some things many years ago that have come true with 100% accuracy. You were still talking about the events of 2014, that I quote, "We will get not only Ukraine in NATO, meaning us, Russia and Belarus, we will get a large number of lunatics, give or take, that's what you said, who will fight with us." That's exactly what happened. Here's what I want to ask you. If we analyze everything that has happened between our peoples, between our countries in the recent years, Then what has happened is this: consciously, methodologically, everything was done so that Ukrainians knew less and less about Belarusians, Ukrainians about Russians, and vice versa. It would seem that people who once lived in the same country know absolutely nothing about each other. For example, believe me, many Ukrainians believe that every Russian waking up in the morning there thinks about how to kill more Ukrainians, which you know very well is absolutely not true. Don't you think that today exactly the same process is taking place in relation to Russia and Belarus on the one hand, and Europe on the other hand? Aren't we also being systematically prepared for some big and terrible processes? I think all of this is possible, because if you conquer other people's brains, you will win in any war in the future. So we, through brains, can be prepared for this. But power is power to counteract it. No matter how difficult it is, no matter how unequal the forces, but it's better to fight like this than to destroy each other with missiles. In this information field, it is difficult but necessary to fight, otherwise you will be at war the way Russia is at war with Ukraine. So we try, we resist, we do our best. You know, in Soviet times, I read Dima Prigozhin's biography, like your dossier I have lying around from all sources. Here I read it, and it turns out that, like me, he graduated from the University of Marxism-Leninism, party education of Soviet times. But his major was economics, mine was propaganda and agitation. So I am a media counterintelligence officer and a propagandist. There were propaganda departments. I mean, I was in charge of political directions, and among other things, the Marxist-Leninist University, together with the higher education, just over 2 years of study there. There were a lot of formalism, but it's a very useful thing. And there I was taught something. And I still realize that the main thing is to get into people's brains, into people's mind, if you say. And a good tactic in Soviet times was to reach every person, get through them, meet them, talk to them. This is the most important direction of our work. Unlike America, Germany, Russia, or China, they are powerful, strong, rich. They can throw any amount of money at the media, and they can get into a person's head by some other means. And in resisting it, you have to reach people. You have to talk to them. You have to go to them. People will appreciate that. Don't forget this method. I was taught it. When I studied at the University of Marxism-Leninism, it's a good method, which is what I'm trying to implement now. I send everybody to the people. After 2020, we have had a huge number of meetings. There is no one that the upper authorities have not met with, including and I trying to meet, talk, tell. Well, and of course the media replicate it. So this is the only way to counter it. We need to mobilize everybody. Everybody needs to mobilize, otherwise we will lose. In 1991, two countries, Ukraine and Belarus, were starting their way to independence. And at that time, Ukraine was the 5th largest economy in Europe, a country with a huge potential it was. In 30 years, we lost 30 million population, we lost industry, we lost science. Today, Belarus is at peace. GDP per capita is twice as much as in Ukraine. You have already answered the question why this happened. Maybe you have some words for Ukrainians, what we need to do to get things back to normal. First of all, Ukrainians need to understand where we are now and who we are. If we do not realize this, then there is no need to do anything. Then we will not know what to do and in which direction to move. To be honest, offhand, I've never really thought about it. I'm even afraid to tell my Ukrainians about it. What should be done? What? I'm afraid to even talk about it. You know, they often call me father, fadera in Ukraine and so on. I sometimes think, how could I have helped Ukraine? And I think that even if, God forbid, I were to have such a fate now to do something in Ukraine, I don't even know what can and what should be done. It is necessary to sit down, dive in, and think about it. That's why I don't want to advise Ukrainians impromptu anything. Well, first of all, we have to stop the war. When there is a war, when you are distracted, when so many people are dying, your relatives, your close ones are dying, what can you think about? What kind of wealth? What kind of building your own house? Cultivating a plot of land? What can you think about when you're sitting there thinking that tomorrow they'll grab you on the street and send you to the front? You'll only think about avoiding that fate. If you don't have only those who can pay to fight on the front, pay off the front. Everything is bought and sold from the recruitment people. It's horrible. That's why we have to clean up the mess. We have to clean up the mess. We have to clean up the mess based on principles that are accepted all over the world. Normal principles, human principles, principles of justice. Based on them, you have to build this life from the very bottom, and then you will face the oligarchs, and then you need to create a normal army, an army that is not for the oligarchs. And an army that will fight not because of one or two people who want to fight, but to protect the people, when you'll realize that you have to build an economy. But first of all, to feed and clothe the people. When we did start in the 91st year, when the Soviet Union collapsed, everything stopped. Nobody needed anything. I was told we should privatize everything to hell. We don't need it. We don't need combined harvesters, tractors, cars. We don't need them. We'll buy everything. Everything stops. It's clear that someone was waiting to come here to buy everything, to buy up, like your oligarchs. I took a different course then. I clenched my teeth. We were saving jobs, and we saved these enterprises. This is what you have to do, and this is what you have to go through in Ukraine. But Ukraine can. It is very rich. Ukraine is much richer in natural resources and climate than Belarus. It can do it, even in these difficult conditions, but it is necessary to make the first step. And the first step is peace. We have to go to peace. Yes, you can fight for these territories. I'm not saying that you should give them up, but you should choose a different method. But by fighting for these territories, you will lose these ones. It's all in front of you. It's given to you. And you have to solve the problem and get some kind of answer. What kind of answer do you want? To have peace of mind, so that people do not die, so that your children do not die, so that you can earn a piece of bread. In Ukraine, wherever you poke a seed, a banana tree grows. It is the richest country in the world, and the people are hard-working to the point of horror. I often reproach some of my own people. Go and learn, I say. Ukrainians have the richest traditions. All this must be restored bit by bit today. So sometimes I think, what would I do? It's horrible. I get scared of what there is to do and to be done. There's a lot to do, but you have to start somewhere. This is the life. This is the destiny of your generation, Diana, and yours already, even though you're very young. This is the destiny, and our generation has to take these steps. Children, grandchildren will then take their next steps, and Ukraine will be Ukraine. It cannot be a beggar in such a land. But you have to take the first steps, and the first step is to stop the war. Mr. Lukashenko, thank you for a frank and very interesting conversation. I know for sure we will be heard by millions of people in Ukraine and in the world. Thank you for this conversation. I have spoken out on a painful subject in relation to my land. They say that my roots are right here, Kiev and Chernigov, somewhere closer to Kiev, between Chernigov and Kiev. It was Yushchenko who told me about it. And he said, do you want me to find your roots there? He liked to create this family tree, you know, and look for his roots. I said, come on, you'll be poking around in those archives. And he said, no, it doesn't cost me anything. I said, no, I don't want it. Thank you so much, Mr. President.